staff really probably is not set up to do that.
Right.
So it's too easy to be overrun with the glitz and glamour of a project and not really consider where it's going to leave you in the end.
I'd like to add on a little something, too, from the perspective of identity. I truly think that over the last 10 to 15 years, we've had a real crisis of identity within our community. You're talking about, and I don't know if you're talking about Derby, Andover, or whatever the suburb of Wichita is that you're familiar with. I know both of those pretty familiar. I'm pretty familiar with both of those towns, and they kind of are going through the same issues and identity crisis that Gardner. It grew fast. It was a farm community. Became an excerpt on the verge of a suburb, and there's a lot of people within this community that remember when we were 5,000 people, 3,000 people, and are wrestling with the changes that have occurred with becoming a bedroom community. And so they're, just as much not in the dark, but just confused about what the future of Gardner is going to be. Are we going to be a transportation hub? Are we going to be a bedroom suburb? Are we going to be a commercial hub, or a combination of them? And so establishing that identity and figuring out what Gardner is going to be going forward for the next 10, 20, 30 years is critical.
Absolutely. We're all looking at you, Kristen.
Oh, you are?
You want to add? You don't have to.
No,
I already picked on you once.
I was just going to say I think that one of the benefits that we have, and this kind of goes to Larry's point a little bit, not specific with the intermodal, but I think that during the growth phase and then kind of the economic turndown, there's a lot of lessons learned that we can utilize, that we have the advantage of having. I'm not going to criticize people that made decisions then, because I don't know, what was before them, but, there are things about, benefit districts that were created, and we saw some issues with those, things that probably, having not been through that type of thing before, would be maybe a little bit hard to, predict. But now we have that information, and so I think as we move forward, we can make some more educated decisions.
Right.
And understand the long-term impact a little bit better.
And I believe it was Steve that talked about the past as prologue.
Mm-hmm.
I think it becomes a problem when our past is solely determinative of our future, but at the same time, if we don't learn from our past, we're doomed to repeat it, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
If I could add one more thing to what Christy said, and she made a great point, and that is that, and I see it from a real estate perspective, that no community, in my opinion, has suffered more from overdevelopment than Gardner, Kansas over the years. And again, I'm not trying to point fingers and blame at any, because we weren't in this position before, maybe we would have made the same decision, but we have a unique perspective that no other community has at this time, because we've suffered more.
Right.
We have more opportunities to develop land,
right,
whether for residential or commercial growth, and we can't afford to make the same mistake.
Right.
We put infrastructure in places that no one else really wants to move to, or close, nearby. We've got infrastructure in various places around the city that did not pan out, and I think we can't afford to ever. We need to be very critical in our decision making in the future.
Well, on that note, Larry, let me make a couple last comments about planning, just food for thought, and relate it back to the budgeting that Ben talked about, and then I want to hear some of your ideas up here on the wall. For me, I mentioned before, I probably facilitate planning about 80% of the time. And so what I'm about to say is probably ironic from someone who facilitates planning for a living, but I believe strategy. I've given up the old textbook definitions now, and I've formed my own school of hard knocks definitions. And I think organizations I've been around that are truly strategic view strategy as an ongoing dialogue they have to create clear and shared and compelling answers to some basic questions. Who are we? Where are we? where are we at today, what differentiates us, and where do we want to go? And each of those questions play a slightly different role in that dialogue. And what differentiates us is really important. So what makes us different? I really do think in our age of scarce resources, communities compete for citizens and businesses just like businesses compete against other businesses in their strategies. And so I think it's an ongoing dialogue, clear, shared, compelling answers. Ongoing dialogue amongst council members, council and staff, council staff in the community, different parts of the community, neighboring community. I mean, there's a whole lot of once you broaden this to strategy within a city setting, it's very complicated because each of those pieces you can blow out a lot. But at the end of the day, it's still dialogue. Strategy isn't the piece of paper. That's just a tool. It's a tool to try to capture and articulate where the dialogue is today to the best of our understanding. And it's an ongoing dialogue. It changes all the time. I don't think strategy is an event, a meeting, a piece of paper. It's the ongoing dialogue. I think budgeting is somewhat like that too. When you're focused on outcomes-based budgeting, it's an ongoing dialogue about where do our resources come from, what are the demands on our resources, and most importantly, what are we trying to achieve by the decisions we make about resourcing. And at the end of the day, strategy has to do two things for you. It has to give you a roadmap. So amongst all the urgent crisis things we have to dispose of and deal with, what are the important non-urgent things we're trying to achieve? That's the roadmap part. And it has to be a filter. When the unexpected happens or new opportunities arise we didn't plan around, that clear shared dialogue has to be the basis for filtering out our decision. And so I think that aligns very well with viewing both strategy and budgeting as ongoing dialogue. You're starting, not that they haven't, maybe re-kicking off, intentionally approaching and nurturing in a little different way. So I guess start that dialogue. Let's hear what you came up with earlier. What we tried to do is take your cards and write them up here so we'd save a little bit of time and you wouldn't have to. Maybe this is a test. We'll see if what I wrote, we can figure out who said it, if you own up to what we said here. But I just took the cards and I didn't know whose was whose, but I tried to write kind of 3 cards at a time. So attract more businesses, increase the tax base. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read them off, and if you don't mind, if that was yours, feel free to jump in a little bit, talk a little bit about what your thought is up there about why that is an important long-term end in mind for the community.
No one's claiming that one, huh?
Well, but I think there's several up
There are several that are
like
related.
that, so I don't know that that's, I mean, I wrote something similar, so I don't know that that's per se mine.
Even better, if you don't know if it's yours, tell us what it means to you. Why is that important?
Well, one of the biggest burdens that we have is our tax base is 85% residential. So all of that tax burden falls onto the residents' shoulders.
Right.
And the key there is to attract more commercial entities to help shoulder that burden. I think it's as simple as that, and I think all of us probably agree it's nothing more than that. And without that, we'll continue to face some of these struggles that we have because the way that everything is built to reach that goal.
Okay. So attracting more businesses is critical to diversifying that tax basis for long-term stewardship of the resources.
And I would say there's...
Correct.
What's Steve going to say?
Sorry, Steve?
I was just saying that's absolutely correct. That was one of my 3, and my point was that we've got, well, first of all, rooftops, it's actually a double-edged sword in a bad way. It's higher per capita to support that from the standpoint of services, and it doesn't provide a large enough, I'm going to say operating margin from the standpoint of revenue in order to be able to support the services that have to service that rooftop. And we have entirely too many rooftops for the population of services that we have to provide. We don't have the business space that is going to be able to provide a large operating margin from the standpoint of city governmental revenue to be able to support the rooftops that we have. And that's what we need more than anything else.